Hey, I'm Elise. After 16 years of building our family company from scratch, my sister handed my role to her boyfriend without warning. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The silence, the secret meetings, the sinking feeling that everyone was in on it except me. Now I'm left wondering, how long had they been plotting this? Before we dive in, what time are you reading this and where from? Drop a comment. I want to know who's hearing my story. The morning sun glinted off the glass facade of Carver and Company as I pushed through the front doors. Everything seemed unchanged. The marble tiles still shone. The receptionist greeted me with that overly bright smile, and the boardroom down the hall still carried the scent of leather and too many egos. I'd walked this hallway for 16 years. My heels had practically worn a path in the floor. But something felt wrong today. No one met my gaze. That was the first hint. I reached for the conference room door, my hand pausing when I saw Clara, my younger sister, already seated at the head of the table. Her posture screamed something I couldn't quite pin down yet. Assured, maybe possessive. Nolan, her boyfriend, sat to her right, grinning like he'd just claimed a prize. And I hadn't even known there was a contest. I stepped into the room, slow and deliberate, offering a polite smile to the board members scattered around the table. No one returned it. "Morning," I said, placing my notepad on the chair that had always been mine, just left of the head seat. Nolan spoke first, his voice slick and cheerful. "Elise, glad you could join us." My stomach churned. "This is the quarterly leadership meeting, isn't it?" Clara folded her hands neatly. "It is, but we're starting with an announcement today." I glanced around, my jaw tightening. These people had toasted at my wedding. I'd guided some of them through 2 recessions and a lawsuit. Now they looked like nervous interns waiting for an email to drop. Clara cleared her throat. "Effective immediately, Nolan will serve as interim CEO during the next phase of company restructuring. This decision has the full support of the board." I blinked, not because I hadn't heard her, but because the words sounded so practiced they barely felt real. I looked to the chairman, Mr. Hargrove, expecting, hoping for him to correct her, but he only nodded, like this had been rehearsed. Approved. Finalized. Nolan stood, extending his hand across the table. "Big shoes to fill, Elise. We'll do our best to honor your legacy." I didn't move, didn't speak. I stared at that outstretched hand like it was a spoiled piece of meat. Legacy. Like I was already gone. I straightened in my seat, my mind racing, piecing together everything. The months Clara had been staying late to help. The way she'd started attending high-level meetings I hadn't invited her to. The casual remarks Nolan made about injecting fresh energy into the company. It had been unfolding right under my nose, and I'd missed it. The air in the room grew heavy. Clara's face was blank, too blank, calculated and smug. For a moment, my chest ached, not from anger, but from something sharper, a kind of grief. I had built this company with my father, from the first client to the first office space to the first profitable quarter. I was the one who'd slept on that lumpy couch in the break room. Clara had only returned 4 years ago after crashing a boutique venture in Seattle and pleading with our father for a second chance. And now she'd taken it all. I scanned the agenda packet. My name was nowhere to be found. Not a single mention. It was as if I'd never existed in this room. They didn't just take my job. They erased me. I pushed back my chair. The scrape echoed. Every eye followed me. "If this is the decision," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could, "then you'll receive my formal response in writing." Nolan opened his mouth, probably to toss in one last grin, but I cut him off. "No need to wish me luck," I said. "Luck's never been why I got this far." I turned to leave. Halfway to the door, I heard his voice behind me, trying to seize the moment. "No hard feelings, Elise. It's just business." I paused, hand on the doorframe, and exhaled once, low and steady. "No," I said. "It's never just business when family wields the blade." I walked out without looking back. In the elevator, my legs started trembling. The adrenaline was fading, and the reality hit like a blow to the chest. I'd just been ousted by my own blood, and every person I thought would speak up had chosen silence. But beneath the pain, there was clarity. I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just betrayed. I was awake now. They hadn't just fired me, they'd declared war. I don't remember the drive home. It must have been muscle memory. Left on Willow right past the train tracks, A slow cruise through the old downtown strip where everything still looked the same even though nothing was. The sun was sinking by the time I turned my key in the lock. My apartment greeted me with its usual stillness. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that fills a space when something massive has been ripped from your life, leaving a void. I tossed my keys on the console table, kicked off my heels, and stared at the unopened bottle of red wine on the kitchen counter. The one I'd been saving for my 17th work anniversary. I cracked the seal without thinking, poured a generous glass, and sat at the dining table without turning on the lights. The shadows suited my mood just fine. No missed calls, no voicemails, no email from HR, not even a sorry it turned out this way from the board, and nothing from my father. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I took a slow sip, letting the bitterness settle. The worst part wasn't the firing. It was the orchestrated silence. They wanted me to vanish quietly, fade out like static. I was starting to realize that had been the plan all along. My phone buzzed, cutting through the quiet. A text from Clara. Asterisk, I didn't want it to go down like this. But you always leave me no choice. You don't trust me. You never have. Asterisk. I stared at the screen, blinking once, twice. That was her excuse. No apology, no explanation. Just that, like it was my fault. Like she'd been forced to carve me out of my own company. You always do this to me. Those words. She'd used them before. I could hear her voice echoing from years past, laced with self-pity and venom masked as vulnerability. When we were kids, she'd say them whenever she didn't get her way. When mom wouldn't let her borrow my clothes. When she crashed my high school graduation party with her drama. When she blamed me for dad not backing her failed Seattle boutique. Clara had never heard no without turning it into a call to arms. I didn't reply to her text. I didn't need to. Instead, I set the phone down, stood, and crossed to the bookshelf. Behind some old trade magazines and photo frames was a notebook I hadn't touched in years. Leather-bound, my initials embossed in the corner. It was the journal I'd kept when we were first growing the company, notes, victories, names, setbacks. Now it would hold something else, a record. Not for them, for me. I opened it, wrote the date, and started listing everything. Every shady comment I'd overheard in the past few months. Every meeting I was excluded from. Every board member who once called me the soul of the company and now avoided my eyes. I noted Clara's sudden access to financial files she'd never bothered with before. And I mapped out Nolan's timeline, too. When he started dating Clara, when he advised on our digital systems upgrade, when he stopped being just her +1 and started appearing in strategy meetings. There were patterns, so many I hadn't wanted to acknowledge before. But the truth was, they'd been plotting this for a while. I'd just been too focused on the work to see it. I ran my fingers along the edge of the table and closed my eyes, letting my thoughts drift back 6 years. Clara had stormed into Dad's office one afternoon, practically buzzing with ambition. She had a full presentation printed out, charts, projections, slogans for what she called a new design era. She wanted full control of the design wing, said she'd modernize it, make it trend-driven and efficient. Said I was stuck in outdated relationships and artisan loyalty. Dad asked for my thoughts. I told him honestly. She didn't understand our clients, and she'd never hold up under pressure. He agreed, gently declined her proposal. I still remember the look she gave me as she left that day, like I'd stolen something from her, like I was standing in a spotlight that should have been hers. You're always the favorite, she muttered as she passed me in the hall. I'd brushed it off back then, told myself she'd move on. Clearly, she hadn't. I stood and walked to the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Somewhere across town, Clara was probably celebrating. Maybe Nolan was pouring champagne. Maybe she'd already claimed my office, swapped my framed photos for her motivational quotes and mood boards. But here's what she never grasped. I didn't build my reputation with hashtags or buzzwords. I built it one relationship at a time. Clients who called me at midnight when their timelines slipped. Teams who stayed late because they believed in our mission. Vendors who offered discounts because I treated them like people, not tools. Clara could take my title. She could even hijack the company's future. But she couldn't rewrite what I'd already accomplished. Not unless I handed her the pen. I picked up the journal again, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote at the top, Phase 1. Because if she thought I'd slink away quietly, she didn't know me at all. By the time Sunday turned to Monday, the haze of anger had lifted, replaced by something keener. I wasn't just going to document my pain. I was going to investigate it. I rose before dawn, dressed like I was still heading into Carver and Company. Blazer, dark jeans, low heels, and drove to a quiet cafe downtown. It was a spot I used to love before the office consumed my life. The place smelled like roasted espresso and determination. I claimed a corner seat by the window, opened my laptop, and logged into my archived email. If they were going to paint me as the problem, I needed to see the brushstrokes. I started with the quarterly reports. Numbers were supposed to be clear, unambiguous. But as I scanned the last 2 quarters data Nolan had presented to the board, something felt off. The profit margins under my leadership looked worse than I recalled, much worse. I opened my original records, documents I'd backed up religiously to my cloud folder every Friday. The figures didn't align. Not even close. In Nolan's slide deck, our Q1 revenue had plummeted, but in my files, Q1 had actually exceeded projections by 14%. He'd pulled several vendor payments from Q2 and reassigned them to Q1 to inflate expenses and shrink the margin. It wasn't just inaccurate, it was deliberate. He'd manipulated the data to make it look like I was mismanaging funds, draining the company, and the board had bought it. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. This wasn't just a hostile takeover. It was a setup. Digging deeper, I pulled up expense logs. One name kept appearing across multiple departments. Prime Edge Interiors. At first glance, it seemed legitimate, a design consulting firm. But I'd never worked with them. Ever. Curious, I opened a new tab and searched for them. No website, no images, no social media presence. Just a P.O. box listed in the footer of an archived invoice. When I cross-checked that address on a property registry site, my stomach lurched. It had once belonged to an LLC Nolan operated out of Seattle, a boutique renovation firm that vanished the moment he and Clara started dating. He'd created a ghost vendor. He was billing Carver and Company through a shell company, inflating fake supplier charges and rerouting funds. And he'd used my name, my department, my projects to push those payments through while I was busy managing real clients. I stared at the screen, fury and disbelief swirling inside me like a tempest. This wasn't just about stealing my role. He'd weaponized my reputation to commit fraud and framed me as incompetent to justify it. I opened a PDF of one invoice, $14, 204, consulting and material recommendations. The signature line read, approved by Elise Carver. Only I'd never seen this invoice, never signed it. And if Nolan was forging approvals in my name, that wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. I began printing every invoice, every discrepancy. I labeled a folder chain of deception and backed it up to a flash drive and 3 separate cloud folders. Then I opened my phone, scrolled to Lena's contact, and typed, * need to meet discreetly. Something's wrong. And it's not just about me getting pushed out. * Lena was sharp and loyal. She'd been my office manager for nearly 9 years before Clara persuaded her to take a leave of absence right after Nolan joined. I had a feeling Lena knew more than she'd ever said publicly. Within 2 minutes, she replied, * tell me when. I've been waiting for this. * That response alone told me I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't alone either. As I packed up, the barista handed me a refill without asking. Looks like you're unraveling something big over there, she said. I gave a faint smile, slipping the flash drive into my coat pocket. Something like that. I stepped out into the morning light with the first spark of clarity in days. I wasn't some scorned executive nursing her wounds. I was a witness, and now I had proof. If Nolan thought erasing me would make it easier to cover his tracks, he'd underestimated me in the worst way. Because he didn't just twist numbers. He used my name to do it. And now I was going to use his name to stop it. I left the cafe just before noon and spent the rest of the day combing through everything again. By 6:45 p.m., my living room floor resembled a detective's board. Papers scattered everywhere, highlighter ink bleeding into printed contracts, and a glass of untouched water warming beside me. Lena's place was just across town. I hadn't seen her since the restructuring, but we'd texted occasionally, safe, surface-level things. She'd gone quiet after Clara started bringing Nolan to meetings, and now I understood why. I drove without music, parked 2 blocks from her duplex to be cautious, and knocked twice. Lena opened the door without a word, ushered me in, and closed the blinds behind her. She looked weary, not the I didn't sleep kind, but the I've carried too much for too long kind. "Did you bring it?" she asked. I held up the flash drive. She nodded, gesturing to the dining table where her laptop was already open. "I've got something too." She pulled out a thick manila folder stuffed with printouts and circled notes. My pulse quickened as she flipped through them. Internal memos, approvals routed through backdoor accounts, and buried in the middle a PDF marked Henry Carver Executive Authorization. I didn't need to open it. I knew what it was. I clicked it anyway. It was a vendor approval form. Prime Edge Interiors, $21,300 for Executive Design Consulting. Signed digitally by my father. Dated 3 days ago. "He's been in and out of post-op care since last month," I said slowly. "He can't even drive, let alone sign approvals." Lena leaned in. "Keep going. Check the metadata." I clicked the document properties. The IP address logged under the signature didn't trace to the hospital or Dad's condo in Crestwood. It traced directly to Carver and Company's internal network, to Nolan's workstation. He'd forged my father's signature. "More than once," Lena added. "I flagged at least 6 other approvals with Henry's name on them, all tied to vendors we've never used. All approved since your access was revoked." My chest tightened. This wasn't just a professional ambush anymore. It was personal, familial, ruthless. "He didn't just erase me," I said. "He used my father, played him like a pawn." Lena's voice was taut. "You need to tell Henry tonight." I nodded, already standing. "Send me those files. Every one." She looked up, wary. "You going to confront him directly?" "I'm not letting him hear it from a subpoena." The drive to Crestwood felt longer than usual, even though the roads were clear. My mind kept replaying every interaction between Nolan and my father. How charming he'd always tried to be. How respectful, the handshakes, the feigned interest in woodworking. All of it was bait. Henry was in his recliner, a blanket over his knees, a crossword half-finished in his lap. He looked friendlier than I remembered. "Elise," he smiled. "This is a surprise." I didn't smile back. I sat across from him, pulled out my iPad, and opened the file. "Dad, did you sign this?" He squinted, adjusting his glasses. "Prime Edge? What's that?" "It's a vendor Nolan's been using to route charges through the company." His brow furrowed. "I haven't signed anything in weeks, maybe months. I've never heard of that vendor." I turned the screen toward him. "That's your signature." He stared at it, eyes narrowing. "That's not mine, Elise," I said gently. "He's been using your name." The color drained from his face. His hand trembled as he reached for the glass of water beside him. Then, suddenly, his eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward. "Dad!" I leapt from the chair, catching his shoulders before he slid to the floor. His pulse thudded weakly under my fingers. I called 911, voice shaking, breath too tight to focus. The ambulance arrived within 6 minutes, but it felt like 6 hours. At the hospital, they said it was a stress-triggered collapse. His blood pressure had spiked dangerously. He'd be okay, but they were keeping him overnight. I sat outside his room, shoulders stiff, spine locked against the vinyl chair. I kept thinking, if I'd waited another day, if I hadn't shown him that document. But I couldn't regret it, because now I knew the full extent of what Nolan had done. This wasn't just a fraudulent invoice. It was the kind of betrayal that broke bones from the inside. He didn't just come for my job. He came for the man who built everything. And that's where the line snapped. They broke the man who built everything. Now I rebuild and I take it all back. The week after my father's collapse was a haze of sterile hospital rooms, insurance forms, and hushed updates from nurses who spoke too softly for my frayed nerves. When Henry finally stabilized and was released to rest at home, I thought I'd finally exhaled. I hadn't. Sunday morning arrived, gray and chilly. Clara had sent a group message inviting close family only for a dinner at Dad's house that evening. No mention of the week's events, no acknowledgement of what had caused them. I knew what it was, a performance. Still, I went, but first I made one stop. I drove to Carver and Company HQ, parking in the side lot like always. The office was mostly dark, save for the server lights glowing faint blue through the lower windows. I walked to the main entrance, swiped my access badge like I had every Monday for over a decade. Nothing. I tried again. No click, no light. I pressed the buzzer. After a pause, the security guard appeared. Mitch, someone who used to bring me coffee when I worked past 8 p.m. He didn't buzz me in. "Hey, Elise," he said, awkward, apologetic. "I was told not to let you in unless HR clears it first. Your status changed." "My status?" I said. "I'm sorry. You know I don't make the rules." I nodded once, tightly, and walked back to my car. My hands shook only slightly as I dialed HR. The voice that answered didn't even sound surprised. "Hi, Elise. How can we help you?" "I need to collect my personal items. I was a partner. I left equipment, documents, my credentials." A pause. Then the voice returned, saccharine and cold. "Unfortunately, your records no longer list you as an executive of Carver and Company. You were formally removed under internal restructuring guidelines. Without a single document, without severance. That's not something I can speak to. You're welcome to submit a formal inquiry. Send me a copy of my termination paperwork. We don't have that on file. You were listed as resigned by failure to comply with leadership transition." I almost laughed. They didn't just fire me. They were rewriting the entire narrative, turning me from founder to footnote. Later that evening, I stood in the hallway outside Dad's home, staring at the oak door like it might snap at me. I could hear the voices inside, the clink of glasses, Nolan's chuckle. Clara opened the door with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "You made it," she said, stepping aside. "I said I would," I replied, brushing past her. Dad was in the living room, legs elevated, blanket across his lap. He looked tired, thinner, but alert. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey, kiddo." "Hey, Dad." I kissed his cheek and squeezed his hand before moving to the dining room where the rest waited. Dinner was roasted chicken, salad, and tension. Clara tapped her wine glass lightly and stood, holding her fork like a microphone. "I just want to thank everyone for being here. It means a lot to Dad and to me." She turned toward me, as if we were still sisters sharing a memory. "I know the company changes have been tough, but I'm finally doing what's right for Carver and Company. It's time we stopped clinging to the past and started building something that endures." A few people nodded. Someone murmured, "Well said." I let the silence linger for a moment. Then I stood. "I'm sorry, what are you building exactly? Because all I see is a hollowed-out company being used to funnel invoices from vendors that don't exist." She blinked. "Elise, let's not make this about business. You made it about business when you broke your own father to get a seat you didn't earn." Her smile cracked. "Wow, there it is. The martyr act. I spent the last 16 years building that firm. You spent the last 4 sneaking behind my back. Nolan forged documents. He used Dad's name, and you're standing here playing CEO at a dinner party. Maybe you're just upset that the world doesn't revolve around you anymore," she snapped. The room went deathly quiet. Everyone froze, eyes darting between us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. "You don't get to rewrite this story," I said, steady. "You don't get to erase me just because you're finally standing where you always wanted." She opened her mouth, but no words came. I turned to my dad. "You didn't deserve what they did. But I promise it doesn't end like this." He nodded, silent but clear-eyed. I left before dessert was served. They erased me from the boardroom, but they're about to see what I build outside it. It started quietly. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting, no curated social media post. Just a key turning in a lock and the heavy sigh of a woman who'd spent 16 years building something only to have her name scrubbed from the plaque. The new office was modest. 2 rooms, 1 glass door, and furniture delivered the day before. But it was mine. The lease was in my name. The paint on the walls was a color I picked. And Lena stood by the window, coffee in hand, her presence steady as ever. "Smells like possibility," she said with a wink. I smiled. "And probably lingering paint fumes." We spent the morning unpacking boxes, setting up laptops, sorting vendor contacts. By 10 o'clock, my inbox began to hum. Clients from my old life had found me. "Elise, where are you working now? Do you still handle interiors for medical offices? Whatever you're doing, we want in." I replied with nothing flashy, just clarity. New firm, small team, same standards. At noon, the front door opened with a soft knock. It was Tom Harker from Harker & Sons Supply, the kind of vendor people overlooked until deadlines loomed. He grinned as he wheeled in 2 carts of lighting equipment. "Thought I'd make the first delivery in person," he said. "Didn't want to risk them mixing it up with your sister's orders." I blinked. You're working with Clara now? I was, until she started asking for rush delivery without paying the rush fees. He paused, setting down a box. You always paid on time. You valued people's time. That's rare, Elise. People remember that. He handed me a folded receipt. Asterisk 50% discount. Don't argue. Asterisk. I didn't. After he left, Lena nudged me. Feels good, huh? It feels real. Later that afternoon, I sat down with a fresh cup of tea and checked my inbox again. One new message. No name, no subject, just an anonymous email from a burner address. Asterisk, you didn't deserve what happened. This is what Nolan doesn't want anyone to see. Asterisk attached was a zip file. I scanned it 3 times before opening it. Inside were internal Carver and company spreadsheets, versions I recognized but with subtle changes. Entire budget lines were shifted. Timestamp logs showed edits after my departure but tagged with my name. And then the kicker. Server login data tying the edits to Nolan's personal workstation. He hadn't just framed me in board meetings. He'd forged my digital trail, retroactively altering records to cover his tracks. It was all here. Dates, edits, user IDs. And someone inside had slipped it to me. I forwarded the file to my lawyer with a message. We're past coincidence now. By dusk, Sam walked through the door, a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. I'm in, he said. They gave my project to an intern and told me to get over the old guard. So yeah, I'm done. He joined Lena and me at the table, where we reviewed the pitch deck for an upcoming commercial property bid. A sleek downtown firm needing a full rebrand and design overhaul. I glanced at our logo in the corner of the slides. It wasn't perfect, the font was too thin, the lines not quite bold enough, but it was ours. You sure we're ready? Lena asked. No, I said. But neither were they when they took my name off the building. They both smiled. I leaned forward, tapping the edge of the screen. Let's build it better than they ever let us. That night, I walked through the office alone, switching off lights room by room. In the hallway, I passed a bulletin board we hadn't filled yet. One pushpin held a single sticky note. Reclaim, rebuild, repeat. I left it there. The next time they see my name, it'll be on the contract they lost. The first time I saw our firm's name listed alongside Carver and Company again, it wasn't in some dramatic expose. It was in an email from the City Development Board announcing the finalist firms for the new Riverfront EcoArts project. 3 names, one of them Willow and Root Interiors, the other Carver and Company. My fingers tightened around the edge of the kitchen counter as I stared at the screen. This was it. Not rumors or coffee shop whispers. This was the moment we'd face off side by side on merit, pitch, and execution. Sam, I called from the next room. He poked his head into the hallway. They just released the shortlist. He crossed the floor in 3 steps. I pointed to the name beside ours. Looks like they're not backing down, he smirked. Word is they're scrambling. But by Monday, I realized scrambling makes people dangerous. The first message came from a former client, someone I'd worked with for 7 years. Her email was curt. Asterisk, I'm so sorry, we're pulling out of our contract. Carver said you're no longer practicing, that you're facing legal trouble. I hope it's not true. Asterisk. I didn't reply immediately. Couldn't. Not until I checked my junk folder, my server, my logs. Nothing flagged. Nothing blocked. They'd gotten to her directly. Then came the second and third messages. In one, the client attached a PDF of internal comms forwarded by mistake. It was from a Carver staffer referencing my name with a red flag. Asterisk, external risk. Do not engage. Asterisk, another came from Clara herself. Subject line. Friendly reminder. Legacy protocols. Inside was one line. We strongly advise avoiding engagement with any designers formerly affiliated with the firm during its transition period. Translation. Stay away from my sister. She's toxic. By Wednesday, the sabotage wasn't subtle anymore. It was precise and calculated. Lena came into my office, face pale. I just got a message from Michelle. She's still on the admin team at Carver. They let go of 3 junior staffers quietly, no cause, but all 3 had lunch with us last week. They're making examples, I said flatly. Sam walked in, holding his phone. Want to guess what just got posted? He turned the screen. It was a job listing, Junior Creative Lead, Commercial Interiors Division. The exact title he'd held. Same pay band, same requirements. Position open due to department realignment, it read. They said my job was being phased out, Sam muttered. Looks like it's alive and well. We stared at each other, the reality sinking in. They weren't just trying to block us from clients. They were erasing every trace we'd ever left behind. Our names, our titles, our existence. A quiet erasure wrapped in corporate policy. Then the biggest blow came Thursday morning. I received a call from Greg Tilden, a major developer with stakes in the Riverfront project. Elise, I sent an inquiry to your firm's contact form 2 days ago. Never heard back. I never got it, I said, panic creeping up my spine. Can you forward it? He did, but the timestamp, it was there. It had been sent. Sam jumped onto the back end of our site, tracing logs. His face went pale. The message was flagged at the server level, intercepted before it even reached your inbox. What? I whispered. Someone installed a filter on the DNS, your domain host. The IP trace. He paused. Carver's legal department. They'd hacked into our public pathway. Not technically criminal if done through a shared vendor or masked admin rights, but definitely illegal once proven. My heart pounded as I stared at my laptop screen. This wasn't just sabotage. They were trying to digitally strangle my new business before it could breathe. I stood slowly, like something primal was building in my spine. So that's the game now. I turned to Lena. Get me the name of every client we've lost in the last 10 days. I want timestamps, IP logs, all of it. To Sam, put Tilden's name at the top of our call list and back up everything. We're preparing a breach report. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd collapse once they dragged the fight into their territory, technology, and silent sabotage. But here's the thing, they forgot. I trained most of the people now sitting in those seats. I built those workflows. I designed those systems. They want to fight. They forgot I taught them how to win. The buzz started small. Just a passing comment Sam overheard while sipping coffee at a local business forum. They're pushing proposals like nothing's wrong, but something's off. The numbers seem inflated. Sam leaned in casually. You might want to check the vendor list, especially anything with the name Prime Edge. Just a tip. That's all it took. By the time he left the venue, half a dozen conversations had shifted tones. By evening, I could sense it. The difference in the emails we were getting: shorter, sharper, less about pricing, more about documentation. People were asking questions. That night, I stayed at the office late, sifting through every folder, every message chain, every contract that had once passed through my hands. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number. The message was brief. Asterisk, I used to work with Nolan in Seattle. He's at it again. Thought you should see this. Asterisk. Attached were 2 files. A signed NDA from an old firm called Aurelian Designs and a confidential exit report. It listed damages from shell vendor billing, internal fraud warnings, and 3 staff resignations directly linked to Nolan's projects. I clicked to the last page. Asterisk subject. Nolan C. Foster. Terminated by board vote. Settlement sealed under NDA. Asterisk. He'd done this before. He'd gotten away with it before. But this time he left the wrong fingerprint. I didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I acted. The next morning I compiled everything. Sam helped organize the digital trail, timestamped edits to Carver records, vendor billing irregularities, e-signature logs forged under my father's name, and the NDA from Seattle. That was the smoking gun. It mirrored the same shell vendor setup, same fake address, same P.O. box. But I didn't send it to the board. I'd already seen what silence looked like from them. Instead, I drafted a message addressed to 11 key names: developers, commercial architecture partners, long-term collaborators, clients. Subject: before you renew, you deserve transparency. I added no commentary, just attachments. Let the facts speak. By noon, the storm had hit. One email chain was forwarded to us, a frantic message from Nolan to the Carver board. Asterisk, this is coordinated. She's trying to dismantle everything. She's bitter. She's unstable. She's making it personal. Asterisk. Clara replied curtly. Why is this the first we're seeing the Seattle file? By 3 p.m., we were getting consultation requests from 2 developers who had just suspended their Carver contracts pending internal review. And then silence, a deep, trembling kind, the kind that always comes before a collapse. When I stepped into the office kitchen to grab a coffee, Lena was scrolling her phone with a smirk. Did you see this? She asked. I walked over. On the screen was a screenshot from a private business Slack channel. Asterisk avoid Carver and Company until further notice. Ongoing audit. Massive liability risk. Heard it from someone close. Asterisk. Sam leaned against the doorway behind me, arms crossed. Guess they're not taking your name lightly anymore. I didn't respond. My eyes were still on that final message from Nolan. Asterisk it's all her. She planned this. Asterisk no, I hadn't planned it. They had planned the theft, the cover-up, the erasure. All I did was refuse to be erased. All I did was show them what they built and who they built it on. I wasn't out for revenge. I just needed them to stop pretending I never mattered. After the inbox explosion and 3 sleepless nights that followed, something unexpected happened. The silence returned, but this time it felt earned. We weren't fighting anymore. We were building. Willow and Root had outgrown its modest launchpad. The new studio was alive, buzzing with laughter, the scent of fresh paint and eucalyptus, and the steady rhythm of ideas taking shape. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, catching on a brass plate that read, Elise Carver, founding partner. I paused in the hallway that morning, watching Lena show a new intern where the supply closet was. Sam was huddled in the meeting room, sketching revisions on a whiteboard, earbuds in. My office door was open, flowers on the windowsill, wild peonies. Someone had remembered. I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you've won something. The kind you give when you've come home. We had 3 signed contracts on the board, 2 more in negotiation, and a feature request from Colorado Modern Interiors, all without a single paid ad. Turns out, when you stop fighting to be heard by the wrong people, the right ones find you. And they stay. Clara and Nolan, meanwhile, were unraveling in slow motion. Word came through a friend in the legal community. Nolan had stepped away from Carver and Company, pending further investigation. He hadn't even logged out of the company server before HR froze his credentials. Last anyone heard, he was back in Seattle, renting a co-working desk under a different LLC name. Carver and Company had lost 2 of its top commercial clients. The board had suspended new bids, no press statements, no PR spin. And Clara? Her Instagram, once a polished reel of CEO brunches and curated press releases, had gone silent. Someone said she was on a retreat in Taos. Someone else said she was staying with a cousin in Denver. No one knew for sure. Honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't watching for an apology. I knew she wouldn't offer one. But the consequences, those came whether you posted about them or not. Later that week, I drove up to Crestwood, a small bouquet in the passenger seat. Dad was sitting on the porch in a wool cardigan, sipping lukewarm tea and pretending he wasn't tired. The oxygen tank beside him hissed faintly. I heard you made the paper, he said with a faint grin. Just the local section, I replied, handing him the flowers. We sat in silence for a while, watching a pair of squirrels bicker over a tree limb. Then he handed me a small envelope. His fingers trembled as he let go. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, yellowed at the edges, a note in his handwriting. Asterisk you were the best part of what I built. I'm sorry I didn't say it when it mattered. Asterisk. No grand speech, no follow-up. He looked down at his tea like the conversation hadn't happened. I didn't cry. Instead, I leaned forward, rested my hand on his, and whispered, "Thank you. That was enough." Later that afternoon, back in town, I met with a reporter from the Fort Collins Tribune. She was young, eager, and a little nervous. I told her she didn't need to record me. I wasn't there to burn anyone down. I just wanted the truth on the record. You've had quite a few people reach out since the fallout, she said, notebook in hand. Do you think Carver and Company can recover? I smiled, not bitter, just honest. I hope they do, I said, but I won't be waiting for them to. She blinked, then scribbled something down quickly. I imagined she'd underlined that line for emphasis. As the interview wrapped, she turned to me one last time. One thing I've been wondering, with everything you went through, why didn't you just walk away from the industry? I took a breath, looked out the cafe window at the sun hitting the rooftops just right. Because I never needed to destroy anything, I said softly. I just needed to build something that remembered me. That evening, I stayed at the office a little later than usual. I walked the floors, touched the walls, checked in on the rendering Sam had pinned to the board. Before I left, I scrawled one line across our mission statement chalk wall. right below the team mantra. You can try to cut a woman out of the story, but if she builds her own pages, you'll read her name eventually. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with clarity. Elise didn't fight to destroy the people who wronged her. She rebuilt herself in full view, proving that legacy isn't something you're handed. It's something you earn, even if you have to fight for every inch of it. Have you ever been erased from a place you helped build or had to walk away just to reclaim your voice? Tell us in the comments. Your story matters too. And if you found power in Elise's journey, don't forget to subscribe. We've got more stories coming. Stories about family, betrayal, healing, and the quiet strength it takes to rise.